Hello, my name is Sam, and I I've been contemplating making this video for a while. Well, actually, like a week, so not that long. Um, and I was a bit hesitant because I don't know how I feel about putting myself on the internet, but I decided just to make it anyway because screw it, life is short. And I think this experience that I'm about to talk about is becoming more and more common because we are in a loneliness epidemic. So I'm hoping this video might reach some people, and maybe people who are going through a similar thing might find comfort in knowing that other people go through it too. And I don't know, it's just maybe it can help someone. Why am I out of breath from that? To start, I'm going to be talking about my university experience and how university was the loneliest time of my life. Yeah. So I started uni. I didn't finish uni that long ago. I finished maybe like half a year ago. So it hasn't been too long, but I started uni fall of 2020, which was smack dab in the middle of the pandemic. And so my first 2 years of university were completely online, and then my third and fourth year were in person, normal university. I also, when I finished high school, I moved cities. My parents and I moved about an hour away from where I grew up. So I left behind all of my hometown high school friends, and I could, because everyone's doing their own thing in university. I rarely saw my hometown friends, and it's just kind of like you just lose contact with a lot of them is basically what happened. Third year we went back in person, and I should have been excited about this because I am finally going to get a normal university experience. However, that wasn't really the case. Like, I wasn't very excited, or I should have been, but unfortunately I think I had completely lost the spark of university, because when you're a freshman, university is extremely exciting. You get to meet a bunch of new people. It's like just a whole new phase of life. Well, by the time my university experience was getting a bit more normal, I was already halfway through the degree, and I didn't really care to make friends. That sounds bad, but I didn't. I had lost that excitement. My goal was just finish and graduate. I didn't really care about any of the other things. I just wanted to be done with university. So I think going into third and fourth year, I didn't have the most optimistic mindset, and I definitely think that contributed to me not having very many friends, or any friends, to be honest. So when I say I didn't have friends in university, I genuinely mean I didn't have friends in university. I really didn't have friends. There was a couple classes where I had someone that I talked to a little bit every now and then, but that never ever amounted to anything. Yeah, I never had anyone to hang out with. I never studied with anyone, never met up with anyone. I would basically just wake up, go to school, attend classes or whatever I had, and then come home, or I'd go to the library. I'd say about 99% of the time I was on my own, which for the most part I didn't mind because I kind of liked being on my own, but there were definitely times where I felt very, very lonely. Specifically like Halloween and St. Patrick's Day were times I felt quite lonely because those are big party times if you're in university and there's always so much going on. But I never celebrated that because I didn't have friends to celebrate it with, or I just never went to any event like that. I never went to a university party or a university event, which I don't know if it's I don't know if that's pathetic to admit, but I'm just gonna admit it. This isn't the worst experience in the world. I'm not sharing this to gain sympathy or pity or anything like that. I'm just explaining what it was like for me, because as I've said, I genuinely think this is becoming a lot more common, and I don't I think a lot of people feel lonely, and I don't think it's talked about that much. and I just kind of want to talk about it. Um, so when I made notes, so that's why I'm looking over there. But so when I went back in person for third year, I did try joining some things. I didn't try very hard, but I did like go to a few drop-in like fitness classes, and then I did try playing a bit of sports. But that also never amounted to anything because it was very short-lived, and my like attendance wasn't very good. I wasn't consistent, so yeah, I don't know. I didn't try too hard, so I never established any type of friendship or connection from doing any of that stuff. In third year, there was this one library I'd always go to in third year to study. This was my favorite library, and I think it was like the first or second week of fourth year, I went to that same library to study, and I think after 30 minutes I left because I was just like, I was hit with all the lonely memories of me studying in this library. And I just thought to myself, I'm like, I can't do this for another year. There's no way I can sit in this library on my own for another year. So I left and I never went back to that library because I just didn't, I don't know, I didn't want to be reminded of how lonely I was, which was unfortunate because that was actually a really nice library. So yeah, I guess that's kind of just to sum up my university experience. It was just, I didn't have friends at uni. I didn't have anyone I could talk to, hang out with. Sometimes this wouldn't bother me because also university is very academically demanding. So most of the time I didn't think that much about my social life because I was always stressed about academics, and that was like the priority. But then there were times I would think about my social life, and I would always just be like, my god, I wish I had someone to talk to at this place, or just like anyone. Another thing I want to talk about, which made my university experience really lonely, specifically my third and fourth year, was so during the summers between second and third and fourth year, I went across the country to work and live in a mountain resort, and I would come back home about a week before school starts, and then I'd just jump right back into school. But those 2 summers at this mountain resort were by far the best experiences of my life. They were so different than my uni life because I had friends, I had fun, I had a really good social life. So coming back to uni after experiencing that was very, very difficult because, like, yes, I was lonely in first and second year, but I think it's like ignorance is bliss. Like, I didn't know anything else, so while I was lonely, I was like, well, this is all I know. Whereas third and fourth year, I had experienced what life should be like. Like, I experienced such, like, high moments, and then coming back to third and fourth year, it just felt so much emptier. And I actually wrote a quote down. I don't know who it's by, but the quote is, "It's so much darker when a light goes out than it would have been if it had never shone. But, okay, whatever, you get the idea. But that genuinely, that's how I felt coming back after that. It was also too much of a contrast, because like I said, I went from the highest highs and then coming back to just isolation, and it was too abrupt of a change, so I didn't have, I don't know, it was very, very difficult for me coming back home after those summers. And I remember being in third and fourth year and just like, I remember thinking, like, what am I doing here? Like, I could be in the mountains having the time of my life, hanging with a bunch of people, but instead I'm here with no friends, studying this stupid degree. Like, what? I also made some really good friends while I was working in the mountain resort, but none of the friends live anywhere near me, so when it was time to say goodbye, that was also extremely heartbreaking, which again made it just so much more difficult coming back home. Yeah. I'm trying to think if that was all I had to say about that. I think it was. Anyway, next point. So I always well, not always, but there is that kind of like phrase that goes around like uni can be the best time of your life, and I get why it would be, because there's so much positives going for university. Um, you're with all your friends, you see them every day. Um, what else? There's more positives. What else is there? Um, you can like play sports, you can join clubs, and you can meet like-minded people. You could be in a relationship. You're also being productive because you're studying, and then you're working towards graduation. So like there's an end goal in mind, and you're with people all the same age as you, working towards the same thing. Like it's a nice little bubble, university. And if you play your cards right, I think university can be an amazing experience. Unfortunately, I didn't play my cards right. I also wasn't dealt a very good hand with the whole pandemic thing. So, let me just say that really quick. I think, obviously, if the pandemic hadn't have happened, I think things would have turned out so differently for me and for anyone else who started university around that time. Unfortunately, the pandemic massively impacted our university experience, and I mean, there's nothing you can do about it, but so going back to what I was saying before, if I can even remember what I was saying before, university, going into university, I thought this could be the best time of my life. Unfortunately, it wasn't, which sucked. This is kind of how I felt going into high school as well, because I remember thinking that high school could be what was going to be like the time of my life, and it wasn't. Like, it was just very mediocre. So, yeah. Fortunately, same thing happened with university, but yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I was watching a show not that long ago, and this is kind of what triggered me to make this video, because in the show, one of the characters was like, oh, this is my friend blah we met in university. And I realized I will never be able to say that line, because I don't have friends from uni. Like, in 10 years, I can't be like, oh, this is blah, and we met in university. And that kind of just, when I heard that kind of like triggered something in me, and made me think about my entire university experience, and it's kind of why I'm making this video. Yeah. Okay, so I guess the last thing about my university experience I want to say is, I didn't go to my graduation. Actually, this isn't the last thing I'm going to say. Why did I say that? But, I didn't go to my graduation. I do think graduation is important, and I encourage everyone to go to their graduation. For me, I just didn't feel like going, and I don't regret that, to be honest. I completely lost my train of thought. I think if I was a bit more involved with my school and felt a bit more connected to it, I would have gone. But I just knew, like, I just did not want to sit in a 2-hour ceremony on my own with no friends, and like have no one to celebrate it with, and I didn't want to do that. It was my personal choice. I didn't attend, and I went traveling instead, so it's not too bad. But I do think graduating university is a very big deal. It's a big accomplishment, so I do think people should go to their university graduations. Graduations? Can that even be pluralized? So, overall, my university experience, I didn't love it. I was very glad it was done. I do not want to go through that again. It was challenging, like, academically, because I was not enjoying my degree. And then socially, I didn't have any friends, so it just felt completely on my own. And I do think there's sirens going by. Hopefully you can't hear that. But I don't think I'm ever gonna be as lonely as I was in university in the future. Knock on wood. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. What? Because I do think my university experience is very, very lonely. And I also wasn't doing that much stuff to make it better. Because I think now I know what to do to make my life less isolated. And which I'm going to talk about in like a little bit. But, this whole video is a bit embarrassing to it. Like, this whole video is me basically just being like, I don't have any friends, which is just kind of embarrassing to admit. So I kind of have to put my ego aside a bit to make this, but I don't know. I think, for one, I just don't really give any shits anymore. And two, I don't think it's that embarrassing because I think this can be used more as like a learning experience. And I don't think people should be embarrassed for feeling this way. And instead just they should use this as encouragement to take steps to kind of improve their lifestyle. So the main thing, kind of like the final endpoint I want to talk about, is the lesson that I learned from my uni experience was that I was not proactive enough in making friends. And that is something I wish I could change. If I could go back and change something, it would be that. And this is why I want to tell people, you need to be proactive in making friends. I think making friends is kind of like an art. And unfortunately, friends don't spawn in our laps. I wish they did, but they don't. We actually have to go out and make friends. And university is the easiest place to make friends. I know that kind of contradicts everything I've been talking about in this video, because this whole video is, I don't have any friends. But genuinely, university is the easiest place to make friends, because after university, you're never going to be in an environment like that again, where you're with people your age, people with same interests, people studying the same thing as you. It's going to be so hard to find yourself in that environment again. So if you're still in university and you feel lonely, I encourage you to take action now, because there's a lot of things. University offers a lot of things to get involved with. I wish I would have done more. You still have the chance to do that, so do it. And it's the most cliche advice, saying like, oh, just like put yourself out there and do more things. I know it's so cliche, but that is kind of the only advice to give. Oh shit. My bad. But that is the only advice to give, really, because it's all up to you. I want to say, for people who relate to this video and do feel lonely, I get that. I fully get that, and I know how dark it can feel, and I know how hard it can be to get out of that, because while I was lonely in university, I knew logically I knew the steps to take to help myself not feel as lonely, but I just didn't take those steps, because it's so hard to get out of a dark place. It's so hard to take the first step to try to get better. But I think you just have to take small steps first. It's, again, so cliche, but for people who feel lonely, what they need to do is put yourself in opportunities that increase your likelihood of making friends. So staying in your room every day doesn't increase the likelihood of making friends, but going on a walk every day, taking the same path where you might see the same people, going to the gym where you're seeing the same people, joining a drop-in fitness class. Those are the types of things that increase the likelihood of making friends. If you're going to join a class, I would say join something that's like weekly and be consistent with it, because then you see the same people every week, because that's how you develop some type of like bond or connection. It's seeing the same people constantly. So, because my whole thing was, even though I'd try joining things, I was never consistent. I would stop after a couple weeks. But if you keep going at it, eventually, you're going to see all these faces that you recognize, and then maybe one day you might feel a bit more confident to strike up a conversation with them, or they might strike up a conversation with you, and, friends. But I think making friends is just putting yourself out there, and you have to risk embarrassing yourself almost. Like, you have to risk maybe talking to someone who you wouldn't normally talk to, or trying something you wouldn't normally try, or just kind of stepping out of your comfort zone. And I know it's hard to do that. I know it's very hard to do that, especially for people who aren't very extroverted, like myself. But at that point, it's like weighing the pros and cons. It's like, would you rather just take the comfortable path and stay in your room all day and not have a social life, or would you rather be uncomfortable for a little bit try something new, and that could possibly amount to maybe a friend. It's, it's which one would you rather have? And a social life is very, very important because humans are social beings. We are meant to connect, but we're not meant to be isolated. And it, so many of us are now because of this loneliness epidemic we're in, but I encourage you to try to do things. That's what I'm trying to do now. I'm just trying to put myself out there a bit more and, go to things and attend things because I don't want to repeat what happened to me in university. I don't want to repeat that again because that was a very, very lonely time and don't want to go back to that. So I think this might be the end of this video, but, I hope if this video reaches, even one person that can kind of relate, and if this helps them at all, then, this video has done its job. If you've watched all the way to the end of this, thank you very much. And yeah, bye.